Welcome to episode 2 of the Uninformed College Football Rants podcast featuring Texas superfan and internet sensation, me and Uncle Brent. We begin with I'm your host, Jack, and this is my co-host, Keith. We begin with my personal top 10. 1, Georgia. 2, Bama. 3, Michigan. 4, Ohio State. 5, SC. 6, Notre Dame. 7, OU. 8, Miami. 9, A&M. And 10, Oklahoma State. Now we will begin our questions. The first question. First, we must introduce the fan himself, me and Uncle Brent.
Who's actually very nice. It's just a joke.
Hello, sports fans.
So, our first question is about Texas. The first question is, can they upset Alabama?
Well, of course they can. Here's what I think about when I want to be optimistic. I think about in 2019, Texas outplayed LSU at home, in Austin, and that LSU team is better than this Alabama team. And this Texas team is way better than that Texas team. So anything's possible. Do I think it's going to happen? Absolutely not. But anything's possible. And that's why they play the games. That's why I'm going. That's why I'm getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning to go to the game.
Yeah, that they ended up losing by a hair to that LSU team, but that LSU team won the national championship decisively.
Correct. And, anything can happen. I trust Steve Sarkisian. We'll see. This is his time to show that he's worth all the money.
That brings us to our next question. Steve Sarkisian had a bit of an interesting history. As we may know, he was fired as the SC head coach for being drunk at a pep rally. So, what do you think of him at Texas so far, and how do you think he's going to do in the years to come?
Well, plus, he's a genius, and he remediated himself like at Alabama, right?
Well, yes, but we have to be honest. Who hasn't been drunk at a pep rally?
What is the point of the pep rally?
I've been to pep rallies drunk, and I've been to pep rallies sober, and I can't say that I blame Sarkisian for being drunk at the pep rally.
If he was winning and drunk at the pep rally, there would be no problem.
Correct. So, look, here's why I like Steve Sarkisian. Everybody loves the comeback. And that guy legitimately hit rock bottom. He lost his job, he lost his family, he lost everything, and he's clawed his way back up.
Absolutely.
And so who doesn't want to root for a guy like that?
Right.
So what do you think of the Texas players, Quinn Ewers and Bijan Robinson?
Well, who knows about Quinn Ewers? Quinn Ewers is completely and totally unproven. I don't like the beard. The beard looks bad.
Yeah, he sort of looks like a Civil War Confederate soldier with the beard.
He looks like
Private
a lot of the
Ewers.
homeless that we have around the stadium. That's correct. But I like the mullet. I do like the mullet.
I like the mullet.
It's a little concerning that he can't quite figure out where to park. So that's, your millions of fans out there may not know that he actually got his car towed during the game last week.
He'll figure it out. Adjusting to a new school is hard.
Well, the kid's going to make probably $3 million this year. It seems like he could have a driver.
Yeah, and he probably bought a pretty nice car off all those NIL deals that he's getting.
Well, apparently he decided to drive his Porsche to the game last week. He also has an Aston Martin, but the Porsche is the one that got towed.
He could probably go 4-8 and still be able to drive a Porsche on the NIL deals.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about 4-8.
So where do you think they're going to be at the end of the season?
And you skipped over Bijan Bijan is super elite and just a hoss.
Bijan is the number one running back in the country, and he only had, I think, 10 carries last week. He had, I believe he had almost 50 yards in the first quarter, and then they weren't going to take the chance to get him hurt.
Yeah.
But if you go back and look at one of his touchdown runs, it was very Barry Sanders-esque. It was amazing. It was an unbelievable run. He's an unbelievable talent.
Hey, Brent, are there any sleeping giants? Like, who's emerging as a potential superstar? Like, if you're telling us to keep our eye on someone, who is it?
So I would watch a defensive end named Sorrell, Sorrell. I would watch our cornerbacks. Our cornerbacks are both pretty strong. Do not look at our middle linebacker. Overshawn, Overshawn's not, I wouldn't call a sleeping giant because he was a good player last year, but Overshawn is a very good player on defense. I think, that's going to be the key to the game tomorrow is can our defense hold up?
You just need a couple big stops.
We just need a couple of stops. And if Sarkisian can't figure out how to score points, then, we have bigger problems. But we need a few stops and then score some points. But keep an eye on I'll tell you who to keep an eye on offense. You didn't ask me this, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you. Jatavian Sanders, our tight end, had a big game last week. He was a super highly recruited defensive end out of high school that wanted to play tight end, and he's a tough matchup for anybody. He had more receiving yards last week than any tight end for Texas since I want to say 2009, like in a long time.
Wow.
And Brent, I don't mean to cut off Jack's agenda, but no one really expects anyone to even really. No one expects anyone to really beat Alabama, like a Georgia they don't have that many peers.
A&M did it last year somehow.
But
why do you keep bringing up things that I don't want to talk about?
But if Texas just shows up and competes and plays, competes, doesn't quit, hangs in there, and acquits himself well, you'll feel okay about where the program is at, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So here's what has people scared. Maybe scared is not the right word, but the game against Arkansas last year was such an embarrassment. It's one thing to lose. It's another thing to be completely manhandled and have no chance physically, which is what happened against Arkansas last year.
Yeah.
And people they do not want to see that happen again. And so a 4-quarter game, people will be happy.
Yeah.
Now
I'll be happy.
On to the next topic. Let's talk about Florida. Utah competes against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, speaking of hanging in there. They're the best team in the Pac-12. They go into possibly the most humid place on planet Earth, being Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, which, in case you didn't know, applied to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site and got laughed at. And what do you think of Florida? How they're, Billy Napier?
Well, I think Billy Napier is an incredible coach, and I think LSU is already wishing that they had hired Billy Napier.
Yeah.
Over Brian Kelly's fake Southern accent and
Correct.
TikTok dances to recruit.
That's right. I think Billy Napier is a great coach. I think Florida's a lot like Texas in that they have an unbelievably fertile recruiting ground right in their home state, and it's just a matter of getting the right coach.
Yeah.
And if Billy Napier is the right coach, then Florida's going to be back in no time. But I wouldn't read too much into that upset because it's the Pac-12.
Right.
And who was Utah's quarterback?
Cam Rising, didn't Texas? Cam Rising.
Former third-string quarterback at Texas. So
he was good last year, though.
Yeah, but he looked like every other Texas quarterback last Saturday.
Yeah. So, speaking of the SEC in Florida, we're moving on to Georgia, who Oregon shows up to the Chick-fil-A kickoff game. They're like, we're the SEC of the West. Yeah, not quite. When you lose by 46 points, that's not exactly a great introduction to if you want to go to the SEC. Welcome to the SEC. Lose by 46 points.
Well, okay, I'm going to go off on my SEC rant.
Okay.
People can talk about the SEC all they want. Georgia is an elite football team this year.
Oh yeah.
Alabama is an elite football team this year.
Yep.
And then name one other elite team in that conference. You can't.
Well, there's only 3. Here's the counter. There's only 3 elite teams. It's those 2 in Ohio State.
Well, that's right. That is correct. And there's a huge drop-off when you get to the Clemsons and the Floridas and the Michigans and teams like that. But here's an interesting factoid for you. The teeny-weeny, everybody makes fun of Big 12 has the same number of teams in the top 11 that the SEC has.
Huh. Which Georgia, I think, is also they're trying to defend their title, and I think they'll play well to do that. Back to the Big 12.
Wait, but who? Oh. Right. So who is it? It's Oklahoma, Baylor. Who else?
Oklahoma
State.
Baylor, and Oklahoma State.
Huh.
Now back to the Big 12. What about UT and OU moving to the SEC? What about that?
Well, that is a financial decision, not anything else. And the Big 12 is dead in the water, and that's obvious. So there's only 2 teams in the Big 12 that any other conference would want, and that's Texas and Oklahoma. So they went to the conference that has, I guess, the closest cultural ties, but more importantly, the biggest TV contracts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's all that's about.
I mean, Baylor and Oklahoma State are also good, but they're in the grand scheme of things, the SEC doesn't really want them because no one outside of Stillwater, Oklahoma, and Waco, Texas.
They don't have the brands.
Yeah, they don't have the brands outside of those 2 cities.
No, they don't have the brand. And when the DOJ is done dealing with what they're dealing with now, and they start looking into Baylor won't even have a football team.
Oh,
really?
yeah.
Why?
Oh, yeah.
What's their deal?
They covered up more rapes than Epstein.
Oh gosh.
Wow.
Oh yeah, and it goes all the way up to the illustrious Ken Starr was president of Baylor and had to resign because of the massive cover-up. It was bad. It was really bad.
Yikes.
Now, with Texas and OU leaving, what's the future of the Big 12 like? I mean, they got UCF and Cincinnati, but they're not exactly Texas and OU. I mean, they might play as good or maybe even slightly better, but they definitely don't have the brands.
No, it's going to be a fantastic basketball conference and maybe women's swimming and diving. And that's about it.
So football will sort of move
What's going to happen?
Well, so my theory is that we're getting very close to having 4 super conferences, and they might get drug into one of the 4 super conferences, but a school like Baylor they bring absolutely nothing to the table. Nothing. They don't bring TV ratings. They don't bring anything to the table.
And they have they arguably have the ugliest uniforms in college football.
Arguably, without a doubt. I mean, what is it with
there is no argument.
Who chose their colors? Was it did Homer Simpson choose their colors?
Well, you got to remember they didn't allow dancing in Waco until 1978.
So, Brent, it's unusual for you to spend this much time beating down on Baylor without beating down on certain other in-state schools.
I've tried to get in there. Jack's made a couple of comments. So I've got a question for Mr. Flanagan, and explain to all your listeners why you have Texas A&M number 9.
Well, originally I had them at number 5 because all the recruiting news and Jimbo Fisher paying his players, but they didn't exactly dominate against Sam Houston. But I think that they could still be respectable, so I'm just keeping them in there for now. But they play one more bad game, they're out of there.
Is your point that, I'm imagining that you're going to make the following point, Brent. The recruiting success was so dazzling that people are perceive them to be a powerhouse, and you're like, but what have they actually done?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, those guys haven't done anything. Number 1. Number 2, several of them committed to Texas A&M without ever visiting College Station, Texas. And I have a feeling once they got there,
it was quite a disappointment.
They're rethinking their decision a lot right now.
SC and Michigan still have open spots.
Well, Texas.
Yeah, and when they started fall camp and realized that their little 5'4" coach that no one can even understand them runs the same offense that Newt Rockne ran in 1938. They have to be wondering, was that $500,000 worth of Bitcoin worth it? Which is only worth $200,000 now, by the way.
Yeah, maybe it'll soon put them into debt with the way Bitcoin's going.
Right. So the rumors in Texas are that a lot of those recruits, or I guess they're not recruits now, but a lot of the freshmen are not too happy, and even some of the recruits and their families are asking, hey, you guys promised us $500,000, and this goofy little Bitcoin thing you gave me is only worth $200,000, so you owe me $300,000.
Exactly.
And never mind that whole thing was illegal to begin with. So, look, if Texas A&M finishes the season in the top 10, I'll do a video podcast with you naked next year. How about that?
We accept the offer.
And
we'll keep the camera above the waist.
Amazing for your ratings.
That is it for this week. We will be back next week to cover some other big games. See you later next week. Bye.